Thank you so much for having me. I'm thrilled to be here. I was so excited last year when it was the first time I made it back to Berkeley 30 years ago. It has now been 31 years since I graced the hallowed halls of UC Berkeley. It's crazy. I started school when I was 6 years old, because I'm sure you're wondering how that's even possible. But anyway, I'm so excited to be here. Nothing invigorates me more than being with young people. I worked with a ton of them when I was at TED and obviously throughout my entire career. I like to consider myself young at heart. But anyway, like I said, I appreciate your time and attention. And so let me get started. So I like to prepare people just to make sure what we're talking about so you know exactly what you're getting yourselves into. And we're going to start with my story, since I think this entire thing is about storytelling. I'm going to explicitly share my TED story because that was another massively transformative moment for me in my life. And then I want to talk to you about your story and how you ought to think about living your life and telling the story that you want to tell. So here's my story. And before I get started, I just wanted to give you a little bit of background on how it is that I got here. I am the quintessence of the American dream. My parents were immigrants from Korea. They came with $800 in their pocket. They didn't have any college education, and they moved to the United States to make sure that the kids that they had would have a bright future. And we eventually made our way after, small venture after another to California because my parents were smart enough to know that the UC system was a pretty brilliant system. And so as a result, my sister and I both went here to UC Berkeley. My first semester was $800. My last semester was $1,600. So it's obviously been a while. It was almost free, but it ended up being an invaluable education. And so I'm so thrilled that I had the opportunity to study here. So as a result of having that background, as rich as it was in experience, it didn't exactly leave me with a massive financial net. And so when I left, I was an econ major, and my dream was to be a newscaster. So I did my research, and I found out that you make $12,000 a year, which even if inflation adjusted is simply not enough to live. And so that was a decision and a dream that I had to put to the side. So what did I do? I ended up using the resources that were here to find another opportunity, and I had to find a more financially secure opportunity. Now I loved econ, and I thought that was a really nice generalist major, and so it was pretty wide open. And I did what most people did back then, which was management consulting, investment banking, all of the folks that had come to campus and did the rounds. And I ended up at JP Morgan in sales and trading. It was a global markets training program, and the reason that I chose it was A, it paid the most, and B, it was an incredible brand to work for, and then C, there was actually some training that was involved. And it brought me to New York City, which I thought was going to be exciting. I was telling you, everyone should live there for at least a year when you're young, or you can be like me and move there 30 years ago and never leave. So I started at JP Morgan, and interestingly enough, I knew nothing about finance. I wasn't good at math, and so I wasn't entirely sure how I ended up on a trading floor pricing fixed income and foreign exchange derivative products. I can tell you with full honesty, I hated every minute of it. I cried in the bathroom every day. I wouldn't let anyone see me cry. I made sure that that was a private moment for myself, but it was a massive struggle. It was an incredible, bright group of people. It was a vibrant, yet wildly toxic environment to be on a trading floor in the mid-90s as a woman. So it was full of stories. I have so many stories. That could be its own entire lecture on what it's like to be on a trading floor as a woman in the mid-90s. But I knew pretty quickly that this was not for me. And so that was the beginning of my journey. But what I want to share more about is less about all of the different jobs, because that's going to take me 10 hours. And I don't think that that's really the most interesting part. What I do want you to take away, if you blur your eyes and look at it, it looks absolutely chaotic, and that is on purpose. I don't want anyone to think that there's always naturally a straight line through your career to define what success looks like. I often liken this to when you watch like a cop show or a detective show, and they're trying to figure out a murder, and then they have like a room on the side where there's yarn and Post-its and arrows to try to figure out who the murderer is. That's what my career looks like. In visual form. And my friend Matt Carlson was the one that created this beautiful image for me. But I think the real story actually comes with the transitions. Because the jobs in and of themselves, you can go look that up on LinkedIn, you can go look up the company, you can go look up the functional area. That's not actually where the challenges and the growth came. It came in making the decisions that I made to start or end at any one of these particular opportunities. So you saw that I first started out at JP Morgan, not because I want to do my dream or pursue your passion or do what you love. It just wasn't an option for me. I had to make a different financial decision. And so what I call this transition is just do what you can. Make the best of what you have in front of you. And that isn't often the most beautiful scenario where you ride off into the sunset, painting and making a beautiful living and having a beautiful financial secure life. That wasn't the opportunity that I had in front of me. I did it, I came, I left. I knew very quickly this was not the job for me. I knew that because I wanted to be a mother, I wanted to have a family, I didn't want to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning, and I didn't feel like being abused on a trading floor. So this was not a pleasant experience, but it definitely built up some grit in me, there's no doubt about it. The next transition is probably one of the weirder ones. When you're on Wall Street and you're working like an animal, and everybody else is just like you, they all came out of college, they all worked in investment banks, and so everyone knows each other. And so the now defunct Lehman Brothers took Tommy Hilfiger public, and a bunch of my friends used to work at Lehman Brothers, and they jumped ship and moved to Tommy Hilfiger. So I moved to fashion, of all places. But of course, what I did was I moved in an analytical role and eventually moved into something that was more marketing and consumer facing. And so there I was with sales and trading and fixed income and foreign exchange, and then marketing at a men's fashion company. So naturally, I decided I'm ready to apply to Harvard Business School. So I did it. I had some level of confidence that's completely beyond me. I wish I had the same confidence as I did before, but this was a moment where I decided, you know what, why not? I applied to 6 schools. I waited until my boss left. I worked from 6 o'clock to midnight every night. I got into 3 schools. Harvard Business School was one of them. And it's a beautiful story because when I called my parents, my dad started crying. It's a pretty unbelievable story. My sister also went to UCLA Business School. This is what the United States can offer, and I'm so grateful for it. So I ended up at Harvard, and I definitely felt like I was an admissions mistake. That's one of the experiences that you have when you get there. And I remember when I got there, we had to have study groups, and they weren't assigned. This was the beginning of understanding how mercenary the world can be. You had to walk around and be like, do you need someone in your study group? They're like, well, where did you work? I'm like, fashion. They're like, forget it, no. So I move on, I'm like, do you need someone in your study group? They're like, where'd you work? Tommy Hilfiger. No, we don't need you. I went to 12 different groups. Everyone said no. It was like, you know that book, Are You My Mother? Are You My Mother? I literally went from person to person and got rejected, and I was near tears. And then I ended up finding a study group that took me in. I think we had the best study group in the entire world, but it was another character building moment, but it toughened me up a little bit. I'm like, okay, this place is not necessarily going to be easy. And when I went, there was 25% women, 75% men. That's no longer the case at almost any school, and thank God that there's progress that gets made on a social level. And so I had a really cool option to do 2 internships. And I thought, you know what, why not? Take it. You know, I could have had fun, I could have gone and traveled the world, but I thought, when am I going to have an opportunity to have a proper job, to see what it feels like to be in that seat and go to work and do that particular job before I commit? So I ended up interviewing and getting 2 job opportunities, 2 internships. One was at BCG and one was at Kraft Foods. So way back when, in the 1990s, a lot of the jobs that people were looking for, management consulting, investment banking, consumer packaged goods. So I had already done the banking thing. I thought, you know what, let's try management consulting and let's try consumer packaged goods. They were wonderful opportunities. I loved it, and I had full-time job offers for when I was going to leave school. But guess what happened in 1999? 99 was this thing called the internet. And I'm like, I think this is going to be big. And it was. It was a massive, frothy bubble of excitement. And there was no possible way that I was not going to be a part of it. Every single person that left business school was at a startup or in venture capital. I mean, we were just lemmings, all going in the same direction. I ended up at the Knot.com, which is a wedding portal. We IPO'd in December of 99. Brilliant experience. Jubilant, overspending on parties and drinks and cocktails. And then March of 2000. Does anyone know what happened in March of 2000? the internet blew up and the whole world exploded. Yeah, that was a nightmare. And by June, we were delisted from the NASDAQ. So my brilliant dream of having millions on paper when we went public went to zero. Nothing you can plan for. Nobody can anticipate it. Even when you think things are frothy and, oh, next year's going to be the year that it's going to tank, it still hasn't. We're on maybe a 20-year run. So, gosh, what do? I'm married at this point. My husband's making more money. And so what do? I make the best of what I can with the circumstance that I'm in. I moved down to Washington, D.C., which was not at all a city that I was interested in working in. There were no consumer-facing brands. It was government contractors and telecom, which is not something I was excited about. What did I do? I networked and I ended up at a wireless software company. Turns out, mobile and internet, two pretty good things to start building on your resume to be digital. It might look like I did that on purpose. I know all of the different digital platforms. Didn't work out that way. It was just the best job that I could find at that moment in a city that I didn't want to be in. But you know what I did? I learned, and I remember it was another tough, gritty moment. I went and I met with some of the product marketing folks, and I remember this woman very well. She goes, you know, Lisa, marketing software isn't the same as marketing sweaters. And I was like, oh, gee, welcome. Thank you so much. That's so sweet of you. So that was another challenge. I knew nothing about wireless software. I knew nothing about product marketing, but I learned some basic things. I learned how do you translate business and customer needs and turn those requirements into something that an engineer will build. That's really the basic gist of product marketing. I learned what it meant to brand something, to launch something, to create a communications plan, to create a marketing plan, and to find and translate all of these different requirements into a product and launch it into the world. Pretty satisfying, even though the underlying product wasn't exciting. It was enterprise application integration software. I mean, the world's most boring acronym that's ever existed on the face of the planet. It was literally your BlackBerry being connected to Salesforce automation, consumer relationship management software, and ERP, enterprise resource planning. But you know what, I thought, hey, you know what, it's okay. There's a customer, we have a product, I have to figure out what it is that the customer wants, I have to translate that and build that and sell it and market the hell out of it. And it turns out that that is a universal skill. So that's one of the things that I realized when I was in that moment. I'm like, it doesn't matter what industry I'm in, the fundamentals are mostly the same. So I got tired of being in DC, we decided to move to New York City. I networked like an animal, as I usually do, and I ended up at AMC Networks at a tiny little music television network called Fuse. And when I got there, I didn't know anything about entertainment, I didn't know anything about TV, and I ended up getting a job in business development. You know what that was? Do deals. What kind of deals? I don't know, do digital deals. So I literally had to define my own role. I went and traveled all over the world, and I did digital distribution deals in Asia. I ended up bringing the first interactive television application to television sets in the United States using short codes, which I'm sure is something that you guys aren't really familiar with. And it was fun and exciting. I actually had to negotiate with the music labels for digital rights at a time where I'm like, what am I fighting for? Rights for what? What's the use case for music? Who's going to use it? In what platform? And in what environment? And what region? I had absolutely no idea, and it was one of the hardest things I'd ever done. But I was like, you know what? More confidence. I can do this. Nobody knows how to negotiate for the future in digital, and particularly not at that time. So I did that for a couple of years, and then I was part of a women's group. I networked. Someone said, you know what, you should meet my boss. I met her. We fell in love. I was 8 months pregnant. She's like, I really like you. And I'm like, I like you too. Obviously, this is not the right opportunity for me right now. I'm 8 months pregnant. I'm not going to be able to move jobs. It's fine. We kept in touch. 10 months later, she calls me. She goes, I've got the job for you. So I go in and I do the same functional role of business development for Scripps Networks, which is Food Network, HGTV, and the Travel Channel. And it was an amazing opportunity. I loved her. I remember thinking as I walked out the door, I'm like, oh, I love her so much. I would work for her forever. And then the next week, she left. These are the kinds of things that you can never anticipate. By the way, this has happened to me 3 times. Every time I fall in love with my boss, I'm like, oh, I could work for you forever. The next week, they're either fired or they quit. So don't get too attached. It's another little mini sub-point of a lesson. But what was so interesting about this opportunity was I was devastated, crying. Everyone was just so upset that she'd gone. You know, you have to move on. I went down to a sales meeting, and interestingly, I was in front of a group of hundreds and hundreds of people, because Scripps Networks was a publicly traded, pretty big company. And as I'm up here, the AV shut down. And so what did I have to do? I was tap dancing. I was like, oh my God, how am I going to keep everybody occupied? It was super awkward. They were trying to fix it. And at that time, the president of the network was standing in the back of the room. And he was so impressed at my ability to stay calm during a super challenging, awkward moment that he ended up offering me the job that she had, which was to run the entire digital business for Scripps Networks. So I went from having 4 people doing a bunch of little distribution deals to running a $100 million digital business for 10 websites, 8 mobile apps, and a bunch of streaming apps. I went from 4 people to 220 people working for me, 100 of which were engineers, all based out of Knoxville, Tennessee. Was I ready? No way in hell. No way in hell. And in retrospect, it probably would have been wise to say, you know what, I'm not ready. Thank you for the opportunity. But the ambitious girl that I was like, you know what, I can do this. I couldn't really. You know, that first year I couldn't really do it. I didn't have a clue what I was doing. And I can tell you with total honesty, it was absolutely not the right move to give me that job. I was as green can be. I wasn't an engineer. I had no idea what the coding languages were. I had no idea what platform consolidation were. I didn't know what any of the enterprise systems were that we worked on. But all of a sudden, I was responsible for all of it. I'm reporting to the executive committee. I'm reporting to the board. The president of the network is now my new boss. I'm in my 30s. I'm like, what the hell am I doing here? So I did that. I'm going to say for a solid year, it was one of the most uncomfortable moments of my entire life, knowing in my heart that I wasn't ready for this. Eventually, I got my sea legs. It was a difficult time, but I got better at it. I surrounded myself with really smart people. I was never ashamed to ask for help. And while I was there, I became very close with the head of ad sales. And I had done a deal a few years before that was really interesting. And we started talking, we're like, you know what? I bet you money we could build something that's bigger than what's here, something more interesting, an online video network for lifestyle. And we can expand outside of food, home, and travel because we're kind of narrowly defined by these television networks that are food, home, and travel. But it turns out lifestyle is wellness and parenting and food and home and travel and exercise and mental health. There's so many things that define lifestyle that we thought, let's try this. And we wrote a business plan. And I'll tell you right now, when someone says we wrote a business plan, it's not as simple as, hey, we just sat down and wrote a business plan. I didn't have any idea how to write a business plan. I mean, I'm sure that in school now, everyone teaches you how to do this. I had absolutely no idea what it meant to write one. But we did, we cobbled it together, we went to the board, and we actually got funding. So we were properly entrepreneurs. We started an entirely new business called YouLive. We bought a video platform out of San Francisco. We built a team here in San Francisco. We ended up signing 125 distribution partners and getting to almost 1 billion streams in the first year. Exhilarating. I cannot express to you what it feels like to have that kind of an entrepreneurial spirit inside of the cocoon of a very well-resourced public company. So it was almost kind of the best of 2 worlds, but it was also very constraining, and eventually it became so big and so successful that they brought it back in-house. And so then the decision was mine and Jeff's. Do we stay or do we go? And at that point, I was pretty burned out. I had 2 young kids at home. I had a husband that was traveling and working all the time. I was traveling down to Knoxville, Tennessee every 3 weeks. And it was brutal. And I was coming out to San Francisco because I had a lot of the team that was out here. That's 3,000 miles away. That's a long flight. That's 6 hours. I can get to Europe for that. And I just realized, you know what? I don't think I want to do this anymore. So I left, and I was at a massive crossroads. So what I did after that was I took a beat. I'm like, what can I do? I got to reset. I thought, I could do like a yoga retreat or do something kind of boring like that. And then I happened to have been part of a leadership institute called the Institute for Embodied Wisdom. And it was a training program for 10 months about somatic leadership. And this is about combining your mind and your body. So if you ask yourself why you trust somebody, it's often not what comes out of their mouth. When you trust someone, it's usually a feeling, and you don't know why. Because you can have two people say the exact same thing. You trust one, and you kind of don't trust the other one. And so this was a great lesson for me to understand that if you don't figure out how to combine all of these things into one body, because you can't separate the two things out, you can't really lead. You can't fully lead. So it's an amazing program. I met all these totally weird new people. One of them started a nonprofit called the Pachamama Alliance. And he goes, why don't you come to the Amazon jungle with us? And I'm like, yes. I left my 2 young children. I went down into the middle of the Amazon jungle in Ecuador, because that's the sacred headwaters of the Amazon River. And I went down for 2 glorious, disconnected weeks, and it was transformative. That, again, is its own class. If I could tell you what that experience was like, transformative. It was so transformative that I'm actually thinking about bringing my 17 and my 19-year-old sons back down to Ecuador, because it was just a magical experience. But what that did was it exposed me to a bunch of new things. I mean, embarrassingly, I'd never heard of Citizens United until I went on that trip. And it was just new people, totally new people, with new ideas. And they're like, what did you do for a living? I kind of describe it to them, and they're like, huh, you should work at TED. I'm like, TED? It didn't even occur to me. I knew every media company, every major media company, every digital platform. I had looked at 40, 50 different companies. TED was totally outside of my line of sight. And I would never have been exposed to that as a concept of a place to work unless I'd gone on this random journey in a random place with a bunch of random new people. And so the point of that is you've got to expand your network and meet with new people, because they're going to come up with ideas that you would otherwise never come up with on your own. And so as a result of that, they knew people, I made my way to TED. In the interim, I had done a couple of advising things for another fashion startup and another not-for-profit startup. But I ended up at TED, and I thought, you know what, this is my dream. I want to work for something that has a mission. But the role was Chief Revenue Officer. And I'll tell you, this is something I didn't know. Having P&L responsibility is entirely different than having revenue responsibility. And you won't know this until you have a job, and I'm telling you right now, they are 2 completely different beasts. And I knew in my gut, revenue just seems so stressful. And it was. It was an elephant that sat on my head for the entire 8 years that I did that job. But it was worth it because the mission of the organization was so profoundly important to me. And I learned so much by being exposed to so many of these different ideas that I wouldn't trade it for the world, as much stress as I may have had. And so I will always be connected to that organization. And as a result of that, I have the capacity to actually teach people about storytelling and public speaking, which turns out to be more important than we ever thought. Because what are we fighting for right now? Attention. We're getting less and less able to pay attention to anything for more than a few minutes. And there are so many inputs that are trying to grab and steal your attention. So the fact that I worked at a place that focuses entirely on how to teach people to listen and to care about what it is that you're speaking about ended up being a gift, like a positive externality that I didn't realize was even available to me. On top of the fact that I got to learn about every possible topic, that's known to man, that ended up being far more interesting and made me a more interesting person. So it was just really a gratifying, beautiful experience. But as you can see, if I told someone, yeah, I've been in consumer packaged goods, investment banking, management consulting, fashion, I have to remember here, television, digital network, digital distribution, and a nonprofit, and I sat on the board of an event software platform, you'd probably think that I was a total schizo. But it turns out that I'm not. But I really do want you to understand that these are sometimes what the pathways look like to a career, and then what you ought to do is embrace it and enjoy it and open yourselves up to learning about new opportunities versus necessarily sticking to one path. That doesn't mean that that's bad. It just means that there's also this option, right? Which makes your life full and rich and interesting in a completely different way and can also lead you to professional and financial success. So that's my story. And so what I wanted to do was to talk about the things that I learned. I wanted to reflect, and this is like, one of the lessons that I want you to think about with every new experience that you have. Just sit for a minute when you're done with it and go, what was the point? Because you can learn something from everything, no matter how awful or how stressful or how ill-prepared you were. There are things that you can learn. And so this is what I distilled from my experiences for the last 30 years of working. So one of them is making the most of your circumstances. And I really want to emphasize this, and I'm sure that I'm completely negating what a lot of other people have come in and told you about, which is just follow your dream, follow your passion, do what you love, right? It's a platitude, and in a perfect world, and you have the opportunity to do that, amazing. But you can't always do that. There are family circumstances, there are geographical constraints, there are financial requirements. There are so many things that can happen in your life. You can have your own health issues. You can't always go and follow your dream right off the bat. But the beauty of it is none of these things are permanent. Sometimes you take that job, you make some money, you get a little nest egg, you create a network, you go back to school, and then you can pursue what it is that you want to do. And you know what, when you get there, you're smarter, you're wiser, and you have a little money in your pocket. That might be the circumstance. It doesn't mean it's the end of the road for your dream. It just means it's a slight detour to do something a little bit more interesting. It might actually make you a better leader by the time you get to the thing that you really love. And I'll tell you, by the time I got to TED, I could never have been prepared to do the work that I did at TED had I not had those other experiences. Because I was in the weird role of having to raise money for a nonprofit. So I was the chief revenue officer of a nonprofit. And everybody thought that everywhere that I got money from was dirty. And it didn't matter where it came from, because it could be an investment bank, they're dirty. Pharma, that's dirty money. I was sports teams, that's dirty money. So I had to figure out, how the hell am I supposed to get to revenue if I can't go to any company that makes money? I could never have done that dance. I couldn't have ever walked that fine line had I not already had 20 years of experience before I got there. So that's the way you kind of have to look at it. It's almost like something serves itself up to you when you're ready and prepared for it. So the next thing is, again, getting way out of my comfort zone. And I did that many times. Doing finance when I didn't know finance, becoming a chief revenue officer when I'd never been responsible for sales, going into the Amazon jungle with a complete group of strangers. If you do that, it's uncomfortable, but I promise you it has been the gateway to more new opportunities and new friendships and more life experiences that have given me the opportunity to tell story after story after story, because my life ended up just being super interesting as a result of that. So do those kinds of things. Go and do weird group activities with a group of strangers. You have no idea who you're going to meet, and you have no idea who's going to give you the next idea for what company you should go work for or what possible careers there are, because it turns out there's any kind of career right now, right? It's almost like build your own pathway. And so try as much as you can to be uncomfortable, because when you come out, I promise you're going to be stronger for it. Betting on myself. I'll tell you why this was extra super hard for me. I know a lot of you probably come from a background that's similar. I came from an Asian household, and the last thing they do in Asian households is add a girl. You're the best. Oh my gosh, nobody's better than you. You don't get that kind of encouragement. In fact, I was like, I suck, I'm dumb, I'm fat, whatever it was, I was down on myself. But I did have these moments where I'm like, you know what, I can do it, I don't care, I can do it. And I took those opportunities. How did I get into Harvard Business School? I have absolutely no idea, still to this day. But I did it, and I took the risk. And what's the downside? You can't fall from the floor. If I don't get in, I don't get in, right? I took these bets on myself, and I'm really glad that I did that. I told myself every day, I'm not an entrepreneur. I am not an entrepreneur. But then when I got the bug, and I had the excitement of writing a business plan and starting a new business from scratch inside of Scripps, I was like, okay, oh my God, let's do it. You have to kind of open yourself up to these opportunities and go, I actually am capable. And I did it in a calculated way. I did have experience. I did have domain expertise. I did have management expertise. So why not go for it? And when you have those opportunities, whether it's right after you graduate or whether it's 10 years down the line, or you happen happen to have a business partner and a friend that you work with and you are absolutely perfectly paired, that could be the window of opportunity to go, you know what, I like you and I think you're smart and you're a compliment to me, let's do something together. So take those moments every once in a while to bet on yourself and have the confidence to do it. And then seizing the moment. I could have gone to BCG, I could have gone to Kraft Foods and had a wonderful life. I could have had a very financially secure situation where I had a guaranteed comp package versus going and getting paid peanuts with the upside at the not.com, but there was no way I was going to participate in that wild ride called, the internet bubble, and I took it. And when the opportunity came up to go to Ecuador, I was like, I'm going to do it. When it came to going to TED, I didn't want the functional role, but I'm like, I love this organization so much, I'm going to do it. And they were the best decisions of my life. So sometimes when these opportunities come, they seem at inopportune times. I can't leave, I've got kids. I can't take this job, there's too much travel. I've got a family to take care of. But I thought, you know what? When am I going to have an experience like this before? When am I going to have exposure to an organization like TED where I get to see the inner workings of this fabulous organization? So you do have to seize the moment. And then lastly, and this is, it sounds so banal and boring and everyone tells you to network and it's so deeply uncomfortable and it's hard to seem authentic and it's exhausting because there's so many different people who do it badly. But networking, my God, is so important. And networking is just another word for getting to know somebody, becoming their friend, having a conversation. Networking isn't like, hi, my name is Lisa, I want a job. Like, this is not, you don't have to be a blunt instrument when you're networking. Networking is really just a way of saying, hey, this is a new group, I'd love to join. What's it all about? It's joining new clubs, it's joining a sports league, it's going on trips by yourself and meeting brand new people. And then also the standard networking, when you go to a conference or where you're going, to some other kind of academic trip. But network, network, network. Do it authentically, be friendly, be authentic. Things will come to you from that perspective. It's almost always how I've gotten the most interesting opportunities in my life, both personally and professionally. Oh, okay, great. Oh gosh, I have to go really fast now. Shoulda, woulda, coulda. These are all the things that I didn't do because it makes it sound like I'm perfect and I knew absolutely everything that I was doing. I would say that the most important thing here, don't skip a step. I started at JP Morgan. I had no idea what I was doing. I waited, I faked it, and all of a sudden it was too late and I couldn't ask the stupid questions anymore, and I'm like, I screwed up. I have no idea what I'm doing and I messed up, so I'm gonna quit. And I did, and I got another job. But if you don't build the proper layers to get to where you need to go, and you don't build the foundation to understand the math or the science underneath it all, you're gonna struggle. Don't skip a step. Reflect on your gifts. Don't be perfect. And in particular, every time you have an opportunity to public speak, please. Inside your club, inside the classroom, in front of your sports team, every time you have the opportunity, this is the lowest risk environment you will ever have to practice, because you're not going to be in front of a management team, you're not going to be in front of a board. Do it. So my TED story, and I'll make this brief. This really was a situation where I thought I had lived in a big world. I lived in New York City, Chicago, Boston, San Francisco, Los Angeles. I traveled to over 50 countries by the time I'd started at TED. I worked in every major industry, and I was like, I'm a very global, I have a big life. I got to TED, and I did not realize how little I knew. And so this is an image that basically says, it opened the aperture of my life. I had no idea how many things I didn't know. And the exposure to so many ideas of things that are important, that I didn't realize were important, or were interesting that I didn't realize were interesting. One of the greatest things you can get is the gift of learning. It was unbelievable. And so I'll just give you one example because I need to rush through this. This is just an example of how learning from some of these TED Talks and learning from new people and new ideas was such an interesting history lesson. So when Apple decided that they wanted to open retail stores, people were like, that's a stupid idea. Like, nobody cares about retail. Nobody wants a physical footprint of a retail space. And so most people thought, oh, what are you going to do? You're going to do competitive research. You're going to go to Best Buy. You're going to go to other stores that sell electronics, and you're going to do your research. They didn't do that. They went and sat with and studied with concierges at the Ritz-Carlton because they decided that it's not product first, it's service first. And so they decided who does service the best? Concierges. And I remember listening to this being like, how novel and cool, because most people would go like to like, retail to retail. And they said, throw that out the window. Our premise is going to be entirely different. We're not going to go look at Best Buy. We're going to go look at the Ritz-Carlton. And, you know, spoiler alert, I'm pretty sure Apple did okay. So I'm going to get through some of these. And so now we're going to get to your story. And this is not just telling you how to think about your career path, but mostly about how to tell your story, because I actually think there is more demand for storytelling than there has ever been before, because nobody pays attention to anything. You can barely read the headlines. I will admit it. I read Apple News. I'll make some statement about some headline, and then someone asks me about it, and I'm like, yeah, I didn't click into the link. I didn't read it. I have absolutely no idea. I was just regurgitating the headline. And so it's really hard to keep people's attention, and that's what your job is right now, because you're selling yourself to whatever job you're going to be, or whatever researcher or professor you want to do research for, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm going to give you some tips on what we teach people on how to storytell. Eventually, you can use these same tips when you probably try to do your own TED Talk, but it's actually useful in all of life, personally and professionally. So here are just a few of the things that we teach people when they're trying to make it onto the TED stage that I think are actually highly relevant regardless of the circumstance that you're speaking. So the first one is arc. An arc is really just an homage to what we already know. You listen to stories, you read books. I mean, I think people read books still. I don't think a lot of people read books. But if you do, you understand the idea of a plot and characters and setting. Same thing with any Netflix show or any streaming service or any movie or television show. The same thing should hold true when you're going to tell a story about yourself, whether it's your career or whether it's the work or the research that you're doing. And so what that means is you have to set the stage. Here's what I'm going to tell you about. Here's the circumstance. Here are the market dynamics. Here's what's happening on the global stage. And what you do is you make it personal. You let people know that you're the expert on that topic so that you set yourself up for being a credible source in the same way that I did. I'd let you know I'm legit. I went to school. I had real jobs. I've had leadership roles. Hopefully you guys respect what it is I have to say. If you can set it up that way so someone says, okay, I know what I'm getting myself into and I know that you are the expert, okay, I'm ready to listen. And then you follow that same arc that most people do when they're writing any story or filming a movie or writing a book. Set it up, there are characters, there are heroines, there are heroes, there are villains, there are victims. Those can be people, environments, competitive companies, it doesn't matter. But think about the characters because once you humanize it, people care more. There's always conflict because you want someone on the edge of their seat. You need there to be a climax and a resolution. I'll say this, we never let anyone do a TED stage unless they have a solution. So you can't get up there and be like, this is what's wrong with the world, this is why politics sucks, this is what's wrong with our two-party system. Thank you for my TED Talk. You have to say, here is what I think are possible solutions. It's just a tidy bow. It's necessary, and it's actually one of the things that is in fact formulaic about a TED Talk. You can't leave until you at least have some suggestions for a solution for the problem that you're suggesting or sharing on the stage. So that's ARC. The next one is audience before content. And so this is not, again, in honor of Glengarry and Russ, always be closing. It's the same thing that I'll tell you, please, I'm begging you, don't do this. Don't take the same resume and apply to every single job with the exact same resume. Does that sound like something that makes sense? Silly, silly thing to do. Well, isn't that the same with regard to a presentation? Is the audience a group of peers and students? Is it your teacher? Is it the CEO? Is it the board? Is it a general audience that's just interested in being there at a conference? You have to make sure that you personalize what it is that you're telling, depending on the audience that you're speaking to. Is it technical? Is it going to be detail-oriented? Is it big picture? Is it meant to be entertaining? Make sure that you care about who you're speaking to, not the natural inclination, which is to have a brag book about all the work that you've done and all the research that you've done and how many hours you've put into it, and then have 700 slides about all the work that you've done because you want to prove to everyone, look at me, I'm the expert, look at all the work I've done. That's not what the audience wants. You have to think about the audience first every single time you put a piece of content out, before you send your resume out, and before you get up and public speak in any forum. Think about the audience. Fog. Fact deficient, obfuscating generalities. People love to do this. I'm going to go ahead and pass through that. But here's a perfect example of fog. You can't read a damn thing. You are squinting. You're not paying attention to me because you're trying to follow along to this. It's not possible. Human beings can't parallel process. So you actually have to spend all your time reading this slide versus listening to me. And most of you are confused, and you put that box there just to make it look pretty, and the whole thing literally gives me a headache. Don't put the most information that you can possibly jam onto a slide when you're presenting. It doesn't work, and it literally shuts people's minds off. Here's an example of a much clearer graphic. Make sure it's simple. It's simple. It takes 1 second to process, and it's additive and complementary to the point that you're trying to make. And then if you can, use bleeding images, because you know what we do from the TED stage? We manage your energy level. We go from a really deep, tragic talk to a light, airy, funny talk, to a scientific talk, to a religious talk, and in the middle we'll throw in dance and singing and performance, because what you have to do is manage people's energy, right? In the same way that you don't have sentence structures with the same sentence, same length of sentence over and over, and why you don't use the same adjectives and same verbs. You have to make sure that you keep it varied, and one of the things that you can do is bring something up that emotes. It makes you feel something. It doesn't make you think, but it makes you feel, because people remember how they feel, not what you say. And these are different ways of defogging. Cliche alerts. Don't start with studies suggest, or have life coachisms or overused phrases like, imagine a world, or what if, or as a nuclear physicist, I think, as a robot brain surgeon, I believe, or you see. You see, it's pretty weird to start a sentence with, you see. And then raise your hand with, I love this one, raise your hand if you blah, blah, blah. Everybody wants to do this. We literally strip it out of everybody's TED Talks. It's so overused. Don't forget, when you use phrases that are overused, it is literally a signal for your brain to turn off. It's so familiar, I don't need to pay attention. And that's the very last thing that you want to do. And then someone once said, Winston Churchill once said, Martin Luther King once said. And then the last bit of advice with regard to public speaking is to memorize, if at all possible. And the person that introduced me, where is she, Carol Ann? She did a beautiful job of this. She memorized, because if I'm talking to you and I'm looking down and I'm looking up and then I'm like telling you that I want you to pay attention to me because I have a lot to tell you about public speaking, and I hope that you find value in what it is that I'm sharing with you. Did you just lose me? Like, you don't care. You really don't want to listen to me. And I'm not saying that you have to do this every time, because sometimes you have to do this on a daily basis. You can't memorize every single time. But when it's something important, if you can, do it. Because you can look at people, you can move around the room, you can notice when somebody's sleeping or looking at their phone and really just kind of get in their face so that they feel super uncomfortable. But there are different ways of keeping the energy up, because what you really want is for people to pay attention to what you're talking to. Because if they don't, what's the point of having an idea to share if nobody is going to pay attention or listen or remember what it is that you have to say? And so if you can, don't look in the mirror. Remember the transitions, throw a ball back and forth with each other. These are all little things that you can do to get that speech inside of your muscle memory so that you remember what it is you're going to say, and then you can say it with confidence when you actually do present. So these are just a few of the tips and tricks that we use from the TED stage, but I think are relevant in life and in general, when you're speaking with people, when you want people to pay attention, when you want people to remember what you are saying, because what we say at TED is that it's a gift. What you're saying should be a gift, and the audience should leave feeling that what they got is a gift. And the sign of a good talk is not that you know that I care, it's that I made you care. And so I hope with that, there were some valuable takeaways and that you learned a little bit something about my career path and the ways in which you can become a very compelling storyteller. So thank you so much. I know I went a little bit over time, but I hope this was useful to you guys.
Lisa, before you put that slide up, can you go back one? You do memorize it, and it's amazing. I have watched you talk twice, and while the slides were similar, the talk is always different, and it's customized to the audience. So we have this set up where Haley has a microphone. I have this one if you all want to line up and ask questions here. Please do. It's kind of fun to hold this mic also. So I will just open it up. Come on, you all. This is your opportunity. There's no one that's going to be more expert in a way than Lisa, but also no one more comforting, because she is a Cal grad, just like all of you all. Wow. Yeah. Oh, look at you.
Hi, my name is Josh. Thank you for coming. I have two questions for you.
Sure.
The first one is, when you were working at Scripps, and I believe you said when you guys decided to go on this entrepreneurial venture and kind of start your own thing, raise money for it, you said you guys signed with, I believe, 100 or 120 distributors.
Mm-hmm.
Could you tell us a little bit how you were able to do that? Was that from zero, or was that off of the tailwind, being part of Scripps already? How were you guys, were you working from zero, or were you working with the tailwind? And either or, how were you able to manage signing your first customers, essentially?
Of course. Definitively was the tailwinds. I worked at Food Network, HGTV, and Travel Channel. Most of the world knows who they are. It's television quality, which means it's expensive video. And the basic premise of that business model was we have content, it's already bite-sized. Appetizer, main, dessert, it was already short content, easy to edit. We didn't have to incur more costs with expensive video production. And we had an internal sales team that we knew we could leverage. Because the premise is that there are a bunch of really small, little, mighty startups. They don't have sales teams, and they don't have their own really quality content, and they often don't have the technology. So it was a built-in solution where the ad was attached to the video with a sales team coming from Scripps, and then being able to leverage that scale in order to sell more effectively into those sites. So we didn't start from zero, not from that perspective, no.
I see, thank you. And then my second question was, could you revisit what no mirrors means? And could you give us a tip on how to memorize a speech, or what does that actually mean? Because I feel so I'm sure that everyone here has been in a high school class or even college class where you take a public speaking course and you get very little out of it. You might just be reading off of a script, or maybe if the teacher's good, they tell you to memorize it, but what does that mean? Do you have to just read it over and over again? Because I find that doesn't really work.
Yeah, it does not work. What I meant by no mirrors, and I'm sorry I was rushing through it, I realized, oh my God, I've gone way over time. It is everyone's first go-to, stand in front of the mirror in the bathroom and recite it. And you know what you do? You just look at yourself. You're like, my hair doesn't look good. Or you wonder if you have a weird mannerism. You end up actually focusing on all the wrong things and not the words. So what we ask people to do, first of all, never word for word. If you forget an of or a to or a the or some random pronoun, you are going to get stuck quickly. And so what you have to do is think about the core message in each one of your paragraphs if you were to think about something that you're writing out. Don't ever memorize word for word. The other thing too is if, let's say you have a speech and there are 10 points that you want to make, and each point is distinct, and they're obviously linked, right? Each distinct point you will always remember the main point of a paragraph. You're in the middle of talking about a concept or a topic, you'll remember it. 99% of TED speakers fall down because they forget what's next. They'll finish a thought and then they go, oh shit, I forgot, I can't remember. Here's the key. Remember the last sentence of the former paragraph and the first sentence of the next paragraph. The transitions are the hardest things to remember. You always remember a complete point that's being made in a paragraph, but you forget the transitions. You're so engrossed in what you're saying, you're so worried about memorizing, you never know what's next. And that's the fastest thing that you can do to try to make sure that you memorize the entirety of it. And don't be upset if you don't remember word for word, because it's going to be the energy. You're going to feel something, you're going to remember an anecdote, you'll add to it. You need your energy to feel natural. And that last thing that I said before, you want to do something else while you're giving your speech so that it really truly becomes muscle memory. So what that means is I would turn on the news really loud, listening to something super dense like BBC, like watching BBC News, and then having that in the backdrop while I'm also using my own words, trying to recite my speech. And that way you're actually forcing yourself to memorize differently. And that's why sometimes you do it on one leg, sometimes you're bouncing one leg, sometimes you're throwing a ball with each other. You're literally trying to force those words into your muscle memory while you're doing another activity. So those are just some of the ways in which we try to help people memorize.
Right, so to make sure I got that, try practicing while doing something else, while you're memorizing it.
Mm-hmm.
But you don't really need to memorize the main point, because you probably, if you're speaking about it, you probably already have it. Just memorize the start and the transition.
The last paragraph and the first paragraph, so that you remember what's next.
So can that be like literally just like flashcards? Like this is the start and end of my first point.
It can be, and on that flashcard, because I mean I have so many pointers, I use different fonts and I highlight, and one's bright yellow and one's bright pink. I do all kinds of things to flash, so I can just briefly look down at it and recall. You can know what the main point is, and then you can have some kind of a signal to what the next point is on a slide or on note cards. But if you put too many words, you will read. You will read it, I promise you. If you have them in front of you, you will use it as a crutch. Put as few words as possible with signals to tell you, this is the main point of what I'm going to talk about. You know it because you know the content and you wrote it, and then you have a signal for what's next.
Josh, I know you. Josh will keep going. Later on, but there are more people with questions.
Hi, Lisa.
Hi.
Thank you for your talk. I'm Daniela. You mentioned a few ways not to start a talk, like a few cliches ways that we shouldn't use. Do you have some advices on how we should start a talk or a sentence?
Absolutely. There are two really critical things to do when you're starting some kind of a talk. One of them I had already mentioned, which is to ground people in what they're about to hear and to ensure that they understand that you are an expert. Because one of the things on the TED application is, what is your idea and what is the reason? Why are you the best person to share that idea? So you have to prove credibility first. Otherwise, you'll be like, why is this hack up here talking about what the hell have they done? They've never had that job, or they've never accomplished anything. You want to make sure that you establish that you're the expert in what it is that you're about to speak about, so that people can relax and go, okay, this is worth listening to. The second piece is to personalize, right? I mean, this is a reason. I was in a car crash, and so as a result, I ended up having this injury, and then I ended up getting into prosthetics. Make it personal, because at the end of the day, you care about people, not things. You care about feelings. You care about, oh God, what happened to you? You want to have empathy or excitement. And the only real way to do that is to personalize it, instead of simply going through a chronology of events. Then I got funding, and then we launched this business. It's very robotic, and it's not something that makes people emote or feel or care about it. So in as much as you can personalize it and say, this is the reason I'm talking about it, I care because I think the topic's interesting, but here's my personal relationship to this particular topic, and I promise you people will care differently.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
Hi, Lisa. You mentioned in your stories that you were often thrown into a role that you had no experience in, and then you somehow make your way through it. And I'm wondering what were your first steps when you're in the role that you have no experience in?
There were. It's sad how many times that's occurred to me. Later in life, obviously, because I had a lot of experience, it didn't happen quite as much. But there were a couple of instances where I was thrown right in, and I think you have to be unapologetic for asking for help. Because the greatest piece of advice I got from the boss that quit 1 week after I pledged my allegiance to her, she said, Lisa, you're the conductor. You don't have to know how to play every instrument. But you do have to understand how they relate to one another and why they are linked to each other. That's the more important piece. So you have to have some vision for where you want that business to go, but you have to look at the people and go, listen, I don't code. I don't understand this particular coding language. I need to rely on you. Here's what I'd like to see happen. but I need you to help me to provide a pathway there. And so I think as long as you have a broader vision of where you want things to go, people will naturally be inspired. If they're inspired, they're more willing to help. And you can ask stupid questions, and you don't wait too long. If you wait and pretend that you know something, it's gonna bite you, I promise. So the sooner that you're willing to admit that you don't know everything, because by the way, nobody does, the minute you do that is the minute that people see that you're vulnerable and they have more of a willingness to help. So I think you've got to be very clear about what direction you're going, that you have an intention to bring the team together and to row in the same direction, and you don't know how to get there, but that I trust you and I need your help in this particular area because I'm not an expert, you are. You're also feeding them with confidence and love and trust.
Got it, thank you.
Yep. And then I'll hand this to you.
Thank you, Lisa, for coming. First of all, I'd like to say you were the best speaker for me since we had. But I had a question because you said something very interesting about making the most out of our circumstances.
Mm-hmm.
For example, you said you needed the money, so you took a job you didn't really like.
Mm-hmm.
But I have a question. Don't you think it could be a bit difficult? Like, for example, I have a loan to reimburse at the end of my studies.
Mm-hmm.
But what if I take that job that I don't like but pays me well, and after 6 years, I have a good income, and I'm like, I want a family, I want to buy apartments. So even though I don't like that job, now it's paying me very well. So isn't it a bit risky not to take that job in the first place?
I understand that. First of all, I'm a proponent of not staying in a job for too long. And I'm going to say 8 to 10 years is kind of a long time. You start to actually become a little bit institutionalized. People then only identify you with that job, and it kind of narrows your opportunities if you want to branch out and do different things. So if you stick to that thought process and you're not as committed to staying for so long, nothing is in cement. I promise you. One of the things that's really important to think about, when you have a functional role, you can bring that functional expertise with you, because at the end of the day, what are people doing? They're making and selling things. And they may be making a service, they may be making a product, but they're selling things. There's a customer, right? There's somebody that's backing you. There's an investor. They're the money people. There are people that can generally translate across basically every industry, whether it's a financial product or a physical product. The key is to maintain at least one of those threads. So you're either an expert in wireless and you use that, but you bring that wireless expertise into a different function, or you're a product marketing person and you can bring that product marketing expertise into any industry. If you can maintain one of those threads, there's a way that you can make your way out and find your way to a new role. Because like I said, if you really just break down the dynamics of how the economy works, people make and sell things. There are customers and there are producers, right? And there are these roles of marketing and sales and product development and distribution really reside in almost every single industry. Obviously, being a doctor, like there are going to be industries that are going to be wildly different where you have a different academic, set of criteria. But I think broadly speaking, I am a testament. I mean, I've been all over the map. But what ends up happening is at some point when you become more senior, you've now had multiple industry experiences, you've had responsibility for different functional areas, and poof, you're ready to be a leader. And I think that's the beauty, starting out somewhere, knowing that there's value in something that you've learned, not staying too long, and leveraging that into another opportunity as long as you maintain one of those threads, functional expertise or industry expertise. You had a question, I'll let you use this, yeah.
Hi Lisa, thank you for a wonderful lecture. And I have some more question for you today. Like compared to the experience you had before TED, what do you think is the big difference between working in a non-profit organization and working in another company?
Yeah. Oh my, so different. Good God. I told you that the TED job, which was my dream job, I could never have done had I started it before. Nonprofits, what I realized when I got there, I was like, oh, for-profits are so much simpler. There's one God. It's it's money, it's revenue, it's profitability, it's cash flow. There's just one beacon, and everyone follows it, and it's unequivocal, it's inarguable, it's clean, and it's simple. Once you jam in a mission, oh my God, it becomes infinitely more complicated. So you have to look for funding in all the right types of places. They have to be aligned with your values. You have to package stuff up such that it doesn't look like you're allowing for greenwashing or whitewashing. So while it is both inspiring to be there, it's taxing on the system because now you have two masters. You have a mission, and then you've got profitability, and those are wildly different and often opposing things, which is why when I was responsible for funding the nonprofit, the only way that I was actually capable of being able to maneuver through the difficulties and the complexities of those business models was because I understood both sides of that equation. I understood how to speak to a business. Businesses are what make the world go round. There's nothing wrong with making money. And I also know what motivates you. I was able to speak about what is it that you're trying to get from your relationship with TED. I was able to speak commercially and then turn around and sell it from a mission perspective into the nonprofit. But I will tell you, it is much more complicated than you think once you have two masters.
I have a question here.
Hi Lisa, thank you for coming in. It's obviously you've had a very varied career throughout the years, and you seem to have derived a lot of value from finding the common themes across many different parts of life. I'm curious, with some of the people that you've worked with at TED, who is the person that you would say has the most unique, varied career trajectory, and what did you learn from them?
You know, I don't know that many people who have had just quite as circuitous a route from a career perspective. But, you know, what I will say is, and I'm going to reference one of my idols, Jane Fonda. There's a documentary that she has, and she talks about her life in acts, Act 1, Act 2, Act 3. And I think about my first life as just regular business, and then I think about the nonprofit as being my Act 2. And I don't know what my Act 3 will be. It might be teaching. That might be my Act 3. What I find is that by the time someone makes it to the TED stage, they've already lived an act or two. And the reason that they have the wisdom and the capacity to identify an idea that is worth spreading is because they've lived a life that's varied and they've had all kinds of, different experiences. That doesn't necessarily mean they have to jump from industry to industry to industry, right? Like I did. But oftentimes they've gone from small to large. They've gone from an academic setting to a commercial setting. And I think the general gist is the more well-rounded that set of experiences, instead of only heads down research always and never something that's commercially facing or customer facing, the people that have had varied experiences have a richer story to tell, and they have a more personal relationship with the idea that they're sharing. And so, I don't know that I necessarily spoke with people about their individual backgrounds or looked on their LinkedIns to see how varied their background was or how totally random it might have been. But I will say that the ones that had the most wisdom had the most experiences of being a lawyer at a regular law firm and then switching over to bail reform and working in a nonprofit, as a lawyer defending people who are basically put in different forms of illegal bail. So, it's usually a juxtaposition against something that gave them the capacity to see the wisdom and identify a new idea. And I do think that you need to have something to contrast in order to really see what an idea is and how to kind of evaluate or find something new and interesting to talk about, because you have an experience that has multiple facets to it and you've experienced it from different angles.
Howdy, Lisa.
Hi.
Thank you for coming
Yeah,
out.
nice
So
to meet you.
I appreciate your clarity with communication. Makes things really easy to understand, but your career journey, many places, I'm curious, what are the 3 personal KPIs that made you decide, hey, when do I need to take my next step?
KPIs. God, I haven't heard KPIs in a long time. I would say probably more than anything, it was just malaise, unhappiness in a job that I've had. But it's a number of things. It's a change in management. It's a going public, going private, having worked at a startup and wanting to go somewhere that was a little bit more stable. There were a variety of different reasons. I will say this, and this is a hard one because it's really not something that you can replicate. It's who you work for that really dictates how happy you are. And so a lot of times it's often the change in management or team that changes the dynamic, because that's what brings you joy. You have a boss you love and respect, and you have a team of people that you like. When there starts to be major changes at a leadership perspective, that's almost always kind of the death knell for me. If I don't actually either respect or agree with the direction that a company is taking, or a lot of people have left because they themselves feel that. Because really at the end of the day, you're working with people, you're not working at a computer, you have to be engaged. And if you like who you work for and you like who you work with, and in particular you have respect for the leadership team, you really do want to stay. But as you noticed, people quit, people get fired, people that you love sometimes leave, and I would probably say that's the biggest reason.
I think we have one more question.
Oh. You can use this one. Oh.
You can do this.
Hello?
Yes.
Okay, here we go. Thanks for coming out, Lisa. I was just wondering if you had any top TED Talks, just in terms of like the delivery and also the content of the speeches.
Of course.
Teach us from failure.
What'd you say? I'm sorry, say that one more time.
Teach us from failure. Did
Yeah.
you say top TED Talks?
Or top. Did you say top 10?
Top, best.
Best top. Okay, yes.
And I'm looking for the other
Oh, the tough ones. Oh God, I have so many stories about failed TED Talks. But I do have a couple. My favorite one that I refer most people to is a woman named Robin Steinberg, and this is actually about bail reform. And I'm going to say it was an A+ in delivery. It was an A+ in establishing what a rock star she was in her industry. It was an A+ in a proven solution to a problem that I didn't know existed. I actually find the talks that are most relevant, I'm like, Jesus, I had no idea clouds were so important. Or, wow, I should really care about the microbiome. It's about topics that I've never heard of, and I'm like, Jesus Christ, I should know about this. And when I listened to that talk, I was in tears. I had no idea the level of injustice, and I also had no idea how clever people can be with regard to coming up with a solution for a problem that seems intractable. Her delivery was impeccable. You believed every word you said. You trusted her solution. She proved it out. It's inspiring. You learn something. You feel something. It's my probably top #1 talk. I have, every time I leave any TED conference, I'm like, this is my new favorite talk. That's my new favorite talk. So I probably have 30 or 40 different favorite talks. That one, and then The Story of Injustice with Brian Stevenson. These are a couple of my favorites.
I want everybody to know something that they may not know about you. As I understand it, this is your second quasi TED Talk ever.
I guess you could say this is my. I wouldn't consider this a TED Talk, even though I think did I end by saying thank you for coming to my TED Talk, because that's what most people do. Yeah, I would say that this is probably my second very long. Sorry for being so long, but very long and dense TED Talk. Yes.
Talk.
Yeah.
It was phenomenal. I know people will want to talk to you afterwards. I just want to thank you so much for your time. In case you all are wondering, Lisa also came from the East Coast here. So, you started at the beginning talking to people next to you. I only know Lisa because of Matt, who
Carlson,
you,
yes, from
Cal
college.
also introduced you. So, it's important who you meet in this class. Keep on meeting people. You never know. You might make your way up to Lisa. I want to thank you very, very much. I'll post our feedback.
Okay.
And thank you all. We'll see you next week, if not just now. And we'll have Microsoft Silicon Valley head, Sean Dillon.